So next up now we have some, well, you could say real drums. Starting off with the track Outsiders. The drums consisted of kick, snare, which is obviously side snare, overhead left, overhead right in Glyn John's position, and then just a mono room mic. So I'm going to play that first off. Let's have a listen to what that sounds like. So if I slowly start to remove them, I'm moving the room mic and the overheads. As you can hear, it's very, very well isolated. Not a lot of spill going on really. So, starting off with the kick. The kick, I wanted like a more vintage sound. This whole track has a very like Dawsey feel to it. So the way in which I got around that is, if we open up the EQ now, absolutely smashing the top end by using the low pass filter all the way down to about 1.5 kilohertz, with a roll off all the way up to about 5k. And then I did a big dip at about 671 hertz by about 6 dB, just to get rid of like the clickiness, and I wanted like the real like puff and punch of the kick, and then absolutely boosting the bottom end. There wasn't a lot of like bassy boominess for the kick recording on this one. I wasn't sure why, but there was just enough room to be able to add that extra bit of 5 dB from 167 hertz all the way down to 10-20 hertz. And then after that, I added the smack, which is a compressor, which is fairly slammed, really pushing that like punch of the kick. And as well as that, I've also got my drum power going on, which is also another smack that's even further compressed. So this kick drum is very, very, very compressed. However, I think it works quite well. Quite effective and quite woolly, I'd describe, for the style of track that I'm going for. So next up we've got the snare. For the snare EQ, I'll just reduce that bottom end from around 35 hertz. Obviously that's not really going to get picked up. I really wanted a lot of warmth for like the snare, so I added a 4 dB boost from around 131 hertz, as you can see here. A slight divot at about 425 hertz here to get rid of that like resonant buoyance, and then I didn't want loads of crack. I wanted it to be like quite a low end snare, so I also reduced the crackle at about 1.92 kilohertz there, and I just left the top end because the isolation on the snare was like really, really good. From there I also added a compressor to really like bring that like shotgun snare kind of sound, and as well as this, it also features drum parallel compression, and I also created a drum reverb, and together this is what it sounds like. Quite a nice snare sound, if I do say so. So next up we've got the overheads. The overheads EQ that I use are, I started off with the generic, one sec. I started off with the generic preset, the splashy overhead 7-band, but then I didn't want, the cymbals were quite like harsh, as you heard in the beginning, so I really, really delved quite deeply on around the 6.5 kilohertz section, and reduced it by about 5 dB to really like lose that like that awful like sibilant sound from the cymbals. They're obviously then panned left and right hard, and as well, something that I like to do is add a lot of drum parallel compression to the cymbals. I normally keep them quite low, but for this case it just works quite well if I brought the levels down and just brought the compression up. I've got them around 10 on each on here, and as well as that, of course, I've then got my reverb. that's what these sound like. I'll wait till they come back in. Just very clean sounding cymbals, like nice bit of wash to them, but not too like intense on the ears, especially that ride's really nice. And then finally for the room mic, I didn't want too much of that like top end, I didn't want any bottom end rumble, just wanted to hone in on that middle section, almost like, well, it's a reverb, that's what the room mic's for, so as if it was a reverb, I've shelved the bottom end from about 100 hertz onwards, and the top end from anything above 5k. By a massive amount, so about 8 decibels on each, and then a slight boost by about 2 dB at about 786 hertz. And for no particular reason, I just wanted to like emphasize that middle section, and this is what the room mic sounds like on its own. I think it's quite quiet, but it kind of shines through and just adds a bit of character to it. So altogether, this is the drum sound. As well as this though, actually, before I forget to mention, is that right? Yeah. So yeah, as I forgot to mention, I did create a drum bus where I sent everything from the drums into an aux input, and on this I added a saturator. It's quite well driven to bring the drum sound all together, without like distorting it too much. More an emphasis of bringing all the frequencies together. And then I also used my Master Deck Classic compressor, which is normally just a mastering plugin, but I quite like the sound of this foundation dial. It has a stereo enhancer, which I used a little bit, it's at about 41%. Combined with the tone and the foundation dial. The foundation focuses on like what frequencies can be heard. It's almost like a bit of a filter. So if I press play now, I bring this all the way down to 30. It really like dulls down the sound. If I bring it all the other way, it makes it really bright. But if I just get it at the right level, it really like dulls down the kit, but not like in a way that ruins the sound, but like, I don't know, it's quite a nice level, I'd say. It creates a sound that I'm going for. So yeah, this is the drum sound. So yeah, that's the drum sound for Outsiders.